Okay.
Anytime.
Anybody that knows my mom knows that she had her sewing machine in a little closet in their condo, and that's where she would sew. So this poem kind of is funny. It relates to that. It was written by her double cousin Elaine Heiberg on her 75th birthday surprise party. So, Ode to Clary, the closet. Poor little Clary in the closet again. She's had another tantrum and was put in the pen. Many years later, our angelic Lee confessed the tormentor who caused this was she. She knew just what buttons to press and how far to ignite all this fury in our little star. But since Clary met Jack, she's as sweet as can be, and we all will love her until she's 103. For years in good temper has our dearest Clary nurtured her brood of Mark, Tom, Kate, and Mary. So out of the closet at last our own Clary is, along with 10 zillion now openly fairies, but still when the spirit moves her, she goes back in the closet where she sews. Signed, Anonymous.
Did she forget Anne in the brood?
No, Anne Mary. She had to do it, so it's not and Mary, it's Anne Mary.
Okay.
Hi, Grandma. How are you?
Hi, Caitlin. Thanks for having me here today.
Yeah, of course. Would you mind introducing yourself for the camera?
Hi, I am Mary Wallace, Fikema Ohado. I'm the third child of Jack and Clary Wallace, middle of older brother, then a sister, me, younger sister, younger brother.
So before we get into your whole family, what was it like about, or what was Grandma Clary's life about? Or what was her life like?
Yeah.
And then, like, growing up, and what was her family like?
My mom, Clary Wallace, growing up, had a pretty interesting life, given that she was born before there was any of the technology that we take for granted today. She was born in a small town called Twin Valley, where her grandpa had bought the mill and owned it, and her uncles strung electric wire across northern Minnesota, bringing electricity to the farms. As my husband Dougie likes to say, they invented electricity in northern Minnesota. So my mom grew up in a family. Her dad was C.B. Olson, and he had siblings, and one of his sisters was Gerda Olson. And then there was a Heiberg family, and Clary's mother was Marie Johanna, or Maya Heiberg, and she had a brother named Andy Heiberg. There were actually 12 Heibergs. But C.B. married Maya, and Andy married Gerda, so they were brother and sister combo, if that makes sense.
Oh, okay.
So my mom grew up then with what they call double cousins. And Andy and Gerda and C.B. and Maya were best friends, so they camped together. They did all kinds of things together. Grandma describes her mom as somebody that could do anything. She could cook and sew and bake, and they camped and had a lot of fun. And so Mom always thought of her cousins, Elaine and Harold Heiberg, as her brothers and sisters. And her early childhood she describes as pretty fun. They grew up on the Wild Rice River in the Red River Valley. And then her mom died when she was 16, which was really difficult for my mom because she was close to her mom, and she died of breast cancer, which is one of the things that is a scourge in our family, if you will. We've had quite a few female survivors of breast cancer in our family, but my great-grandmother, my mom Clary's mother, died of breast cancer in her late 40s, I believe. And Grandpa had 5 kids, my mom and her siblings, and so within a pretty short time he remarried a woman named Afton Storms. And my mom was not happy about that arrangement. And she had pretty much managed the household, and then when Afton came in, she took over. And I think my mom just had a lot of unexpressed anger and resentment. So
Was it like a hostile environment for her, or was it just more of her holding these emotions inside?
Well, to hear tell of it, she fought with her dad. Afton was going to use a set of dishes that belonged to my grandma Maya, and my mom told her she couldn't have them, and she packed them up and took them. And
she just left home and never came
well,
back?
she went away to school to North Dakota. She was going to be a teacher, but that wasn't really her calling. And the thing that's interesting about my mom is she was very independent. So she always had really close friends, girlfriends. And so there's a period of time where she traveled with her friends. I have some old photos of her on a dude ranch out west, fishing, just kind of hanging out with her girlfriends and having fun. And then she ended up in Minneapolis at the end of World War II at Swedish School of Nursing,
Okay.
which was a 3-year nursing program. And she got her RN.
And then did she decide to stay in Minneapolis instead of traveling anymore? Or?
She, again, had close friends that were in nursing school with her. And they went first to Fergus Falls and worked there for a while, and they got offered jobs in Worthington, Minnesota. And so as a single woman, with a nursing degree, she moved to Worthington, where she met my dad. And that was my dad's hometown, was Worthington, Minnesota.
How did they meet?
The story is they met at a Halloween party. And my mom was older than my dad. She was like 6 years older. She was very beautiful, but she never knew that about herself. She never felt like she was a beautiful person.
Why do you think that is?
Just the same standards of beauty that, we all face.
Did your mom ever talk to you about her first impressions of Jack?
I'm kind of thinking it was love at first sight, but she was fighting it because he was younger. He was Catholic and she was Lutheran, and in those days that was a really big deal. Catholics and Lutherans didn't get married. Her family almost disowned her when she told them that she was going to marry my dad because he didn't have what they would call a solid job. He was in sales. He worked at the gas company, and he was Catholic. And I'm not sure if the drinking came in then, but the Lutheran relatives, my mom's family, were all teetotalers. Actually, great-grandpa J.F. Heiberg ran for Senate on a prohibition ticket. He wanted to abolish
Oh, gosh.
alcohol. I have that speech somewhere. But, they persevered and dated and decided to get married. And her family almost disowned her. They weren't going to come to the wedding. And at the last minute, Grandpa CB did, and Grandma Afton did come to the wedding.
Okay.
And so that was the start of their married life with that kind of conflict. But that's something that my mom could well deal with.
Okay. And so when did they decide to get married? How long did they know each other?
I think they got married fairly soon. They met in like 49 or something, and they got married in 1950, in July of 1950. And then my brother Mark was born the following June, 1951. And then they had a baby every year after that. Anne was born in 52, in June. I was born in June of 1953. Katie was born in June of 1954. And Tom was a preemie, came in April of 1955. And then I think it was the next year, or a little bit longer than a year, they had a sixth child named Jimmy, who died after only a few weeks.
Do you remember those events, or that event happening?
I don't remember it, but, the family stories, my mom would always say they took us to the funeral home, and Jimmy was in a little white bassinet kind of coffin thing, and I guess my brother Mark looked at him and said, I guess he is dead after all. So it's always kind of a, something that we laughed about. But my mom said she thought about him every day. She that was her child, and it was really difficult for her.
How so? Just how did it affect her, is what I mean.
Well, the thing about my mom is no matter what happened, she never quit. So however she was feeling emotionally or physically. She had 5 kids, and she was working at least part-time, and so she just never quit. So whatever emotions or whatever difficulties she had with that, she didn't take time out and just say, I need time to deal with this. It was just like business as usual.
Do you think that it affected you kids at all in a way, or did you see like a shift or change in the family?
Not really.
No.
In an Irish family, because my dad was Irish, death is sort of part of the scenery. We had a lot of great aunts and uncles, and so when somebody in the family died from the very earliest age I can remember, we would get pulled out of school to go to great Aunt Janie Maroney's funeral, or we would hear that she died, and so the night before, with the wake, the bottle of whiskey would come out in the middle of the table, and everybody would start drinking and telling stories about whoever it was that passed away.
So it was more of like a celebration of life?
Yeah, and I don't remember that happening when Jimmy died, but I think death has always been just sort of part of what I grew up with.
Okay. Speaking of growing up, what was it like growing up do you remember anything from the 50s at all?
Well, I was born in 53, so I was pretty young. But growing up in the 60s was more, I remember seeing the Beatles for the first time perform on Ed Sullivan. And that was a really big deal. The Monkees had their own TV show. We had to be home Monday night to watch the Monkees on TV. All of that was new, the idea of these rock bands or these musicians as entities, because of the television, it was a lot more widespread. We listened to records at that time on a, little box turntable where you could play like 45s, which were the small ones with the big hole in the center, and you could just buy singles. And my siblings were more into music than I was because I never spent money on music. But my sister Ann, really was into music quite a bit.
So what were you into?
Reading, studying. I was an introvert. I liked being by myself. So you can imagine in a family of 5 kids, there was a lot going on. So
Did you go nuts sometimes?
Well, it was a family where if I just went up to my room and read, nobody cared because everybody was readers in our family. We had a big shelf of the Reader's Digest condensed books, and so I always had that. And we used to look at my mom's old nursing textbooks too and find gross pictures of babies being born and stuff like that. But, we went to the library, and I liked school, so I studied. Yeah.
Where did you grow up and go to high school high school?
Well, I went to Catholic school through the 8th grade.
Okay.
So we had nuns teaching.
How was that? What was that like?
Well, there's a lot of horror stories about how the nuns treated some of the boys and how mean they were, but I never had that experience with any of the teachers. But I was somebody that didn't break the rules. I didn't want any attention on myself, so I kind of flew under the radar. And but like I said, I liked school, and my experience of the nuns now, looking back on it, is they were the first really well-educated women I ever met, and they provided me with a really solid liberal arts education through the 8th grade. And then I went to the regular Worthington High School for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade and graduated from there.
How was that?
It was, I don't have a lot of memories. I mean, it wasn't miserable, but those were the days girls couldn't wear pants to school. We had to wear dresses and nylons, and looking back on it, that's that's pretty recent to have those kind of dress codes. But I didn't have a lot of friends, but as part of our family, when you think about our extended family, I was in the middle of my sibling group, but I was also in the middle of a group of 19 first cousins. So I was really insulated on all sides with my cousins, and I can remember thinking, even if nobody likes me and I don't have any friends, my cousins have to be my friends because they're...
So you were pretty close with your cousins?
Yeah, we grew up really close, and we're still close to this day. But, we'd have sleepovers, and we were all close in age.
Did you guys ever get into any trouble that you could tell me about?
Not that I can tell you about.
For the project.
Actually, like I said, I flew under the radar. I didn't get into trouble. I didn't want that kind of attention. But my dad would say the day I met one of my best friends, Donna, Sheriff Bassman, was the day that Mary went bad.
How come?
Well, I just got in with a group of girls that were more adventurous, and we had fun, and I experienced my first drink. We experimented with marijuana. We stayed out at night. We went to parties we weren't supposed to be at.
And how old were you?
Oh, 17.
Okay. So, can you talk about what we have on the table here a little bit?
Well, I
Would
just
you
brought
like
some
to share and read
things.
some stuff?
The Irish, of course, for my dad, because he really was proud of being Irish. And so this is a little beanie baby named Wallace that came out one year, and we all got one of these, just because Wallace is the family name, and it's Scottish more than Irish. But my granny was an Irish. Bridget Ellen Kennedy was her maiden name, and then she married my grandpa Dave Wallace, and they were straight up Irish Scot.
Yeah.
And then this my sister Katie made one year for a family reunion. It's called the Wallace Family Album, and it's something you don't see very often anymore, which is a VHS tape. And it's really fun because it's just photographs set to music, and I had it converted to a CD just so we would have something to play it on at a more recent family reunion. But it's a really cool compilation of mostly, the cousins, my dad's siblings and their kids and my cousins. And then I found these. I haven't listened to them forever. I don't know if somebody could just transcribe these, but this is dated March 31st, 2000. And my dad and his siblings, his 3 sisters, Pat and Kay and Jane, and his brother Dave sat down and talked about their memories growing up.
That's awesome.
And so I haven't listened to these for a long time, but some of those stories were really about how poor they were growing up. And they didn't have a place to live, so they moved in. My grandma was an orphan. Her mom died and her dad left. And she grew up with her aunt. When I said Aunt Janie Maroney before, that's who raised my grandma. And so that's who they lived with, and Maroney's had like 10 kids, and my grandma and grandpa had 5 kids. What am I doing?
The microphone is showing.
Oh,
There you go.
okay. So anyway, they just talked about, and that's why family was so important to my grandma. That
Oh, I lost her again.
Do you want to pause it?
Don't pause it.
okay.
Just when you start moving around, all of a sudden the audio
It'll-
starts cutting in and out.
Oh,
You're upside down.
okay.
Sorry. And Caitlin, quit clicking your pen.
It's like right on the mic.
So can I cover this up now or no?
No, don't cover it up.
Okay, I'll just be like that.
Tom, did you get all that stuff on that table when she was looking at that?
I'm gonna shoot it right now.
Okay, because I didn't come off of her.
Yeah, don't
so-
come on. It's just in the picture.
No.
So
We'll look at that.
anyway, with my
Hey,
grandma.
Do a little transition there from the stuff. Talk about, don't move anything, but just talk about the bear and then just keep going after that.
Okay, so this is a little bear named Wallace.
Don't move it, I said.
Oh. This is a little bear named Wallace that we think of my dad, and some tapes of my dad and his siblings talking about how difficult they had time growing up. And that's why for my grandma, Wallace, Granny we called her, family was everything. If she said, come to Worthington, everybody showed up in Worthington for a family gathering. And when she died, that kind of went by the wayside a bit. But family, I think that's where the really strong sense of family comes from.
So, you talked about having a strong family. Was there anything that may have broken that bond a little bit throughout the years, or just kind of, a time where you guys were struggling?
Well, I think my mom was a wonderful person, but she had a streak and she kind of knew how to, at least for me, she knew how to hit me in my soft spot, so she could hurt my feelings pretty badly. When I married Matt's dad, Frank, they didn't approve of that at all and tried to talk me out of it. But I had a strong belief that we were going to have a baby and we should get married. And Frank was willing to go along with it. So my mom and dad supported us in that decision. Like I said, I found out I was pregnant when I was 19, and in retrospect, what I thought at the time was the worst thing that ever happened to me turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. Matthew's been a gift in my life and has really kind of guided the direction that my life has taken, with being able to focus on him and his well-being. And my parents played a big part in that because I was a single parent. Frank didn't stay around very long. He was a violent person. And so when we were able to separate, my family really stepped in and helped, because I worked full-time and was going to school, and I drank quite a bit when Matt was little. And my mom and dad really did pick up and provide a safe place for Matt to be when I couldn't always be there for him. And I'm really grateful for that.
Okay, and can you talk to me about those years that you were drinking quite a bit, if you are comfortable with it?
I can. I started like when I was 18, 19 years old drinking, and was a blackout drinker from the very beginning. But I loved how alcohol made me feel. So I continued to drink, trying to get that feeling without getting into trouble. And I maintained that, pretty well on the surface for quite a few years. And my dad was an alcoholic, and he sobered up it was my 30th birthday, whenever that would have been. We drank quite a bit the night of my 30th birthday, and he went into treatment the next day. And then I went to my first AA meeting in 1991, September 8th of 1991, and I haven't had a drink since then.
What happened that you decided it was time to stop?
I was working with a counselor, and she asked me to take a look at my drinking. And I said, it's not my drinking that's the problem. It's all these people in my life that are all effed up. And if we could just figure out how to make them change, then I wouldn't have to drink so much. She said, I think you need to go to an AA meeting. And I said, well, I really can't find one that's convenient. And if you know anything about AA, they're like 24/7. You would be hard-pressed not to find a meeting. But I was just making excuses because I didn't really want to quit drinking. But a friend of mine that I worked with got a DUI, and she was court-ordered to AA. So as a good coworker, I said, I'll go with you because my counselor wants me to go to an AA meeting. And I went to that meeting and met some people there, and they told me their stories. And I kind of thought, if these losers can get sober, I suppose I can too. I was really pretty arrogant. But I was also sick, very, hungover, sick. I had cleaned out the liquor cabinet with a friend the night before I went to that meeting. And so that was the last time I had a drink. I went to that meeting, and I kept going back. As they said, keep coming back. And, met people along the way that really helped me. And I love to read and learn. And so
how many years has it been since your last drink?
September 8th of 91. So I think this year was 27 years. Can you do the math?
27.
Mm-hmm. Best thing that ever happened to me. The second best thing that ever happened to me.
Good, and we're proud.
And again, one of those things that I thought was the worst thing in the world, and then it turned out to be the best.
Mm-hmm.
It's changed my life, being sober.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember my wedding, but I had my big book, my AA book, tied with ribbons and flowers on it instead of a Bible or a prayer book.
So what were some of the best moments? Can you tell me any stories about growing up?
Oh my God, we had so much fun. If you got all 5 of my siblings at this table, we could tell stories nonstop about how much fun we had. I mean, when we were little, we grew up in a neighborhood where we had enough kids to make a wagon train or staff a hospital. So we'd play these really, fantastic games. And then my brothers and sisters are all, our family had great senses of humor. So, we would tell stories and we'd laugh and we'd fight. And, but for the most part, we had a really good time. We'd go to my grandma and grandpa's cabin every summer, which was the best of times. And sleep on the sleeping porch, and you could hear the lake and the loons and smell the water and the sand. And it was just really, really fantastic memories. As a matter of fact, that's where we put some of Katie's ashes after she died.
Oh, really?
She asked us to take her ashes up there, and we poured some out in front. My grandparents' cabin isn't there anymore, but his grandpa's boathouse is still there, so we poured them in the water by the boathouse.
That's awesome. So, you talk about my dad being the number one thing in your life.
Mm-hmm.
How would you say that he, affected your life when you were, you were 19, so you're pretty young.
Well, in retrospect, I'm 19 years old. I go to the hospital. I have this tiny little baby, and they hand him off to me, and okay, see ya. No handbook, nothing. I didn't know how to take care of him. But again, my mom stepped in, and she taught me how to give him a bath. And, being a mother had never been one of the priorities that I had, and so having Matthew really forced me to look at my life differently. And I nursed him for the first few months, and that was an incredibly close experience. But I was married to his dad, who resented the time that I spent, and I'm sorry if this is painful for Matthew. It's painful for me, but Frank demanded me to split my attention. Like most fathers you would expect, they would make that little nest for the mom and baby, but Frank wasn't like that. He's, and I think he's proved that over Matt's lifetime that
How long were you guys together for before he left?
Matt was 18 months old when I left for good and filed for divorce.
Yeah.
And then it was until we moved to Morris when right before Matt started kindergarten. Because I literally moved and didn't give him our address.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was so difficult to break away from him.
Yeah. And what were your greatest memories of my dad's childhood and you guys together?
We just had a lot of fun together. I don't remember a lot of it, but my sister-in-law, Mary Jo Wallace, says she remembers coming over and I'd be on the floor coloring with Matt or playing with him. And Matt loved to draw from the time he was a little tiny baby and could hold a crayon. And I still have a box full of pictures that he drew when he was really little. And he just had such an ability to put feeling into the drawings that he made, even if it was just a little line drawing of a puppy. You could tell. And I was just always amazed by that because I was not gifted with that.
So when my dad grew up and met my mom, what were your first thoughts?
You want to hear the real story about that? We were living in a house over on Arcade Street. Matt was going to Johnson High School. And he came home one day and said that he had invited this girl to go to the prom with him. And I'm like, what girl? And that Matt and your mom were part of a big group of friends that they're still friends with today. So they were going to go golfing. So they came over to the house to pick up Matt, but they didn't come in the house. So I have a chair, and I'm up on the chair looking out the piano window in the house to get a look at this girl that Matthew has asked to prom, who turned out to be your mom. Because I was just like, I don't know if she's good enough for my boy. And then when I met her and her family, and, they were wonderful. They really, again, they were people that picked up a little bit for Matthew when I couldn't always be there for him. He spent a lot of time at your grandma and grandpa Connert's, and I have always been grateful for that. And then we got to know, we joined for the Memorial Weekend camp out, and they accused me of bringing the rain. But yeah, I think this is a good time to say that one of the things I'm most grateful for is my son found a woman who really loves him and that he really loves, and that they live that every day. There's no greater gift than to see your child married to someone who really cares about him.
I'm gonna cry.
And such a great mom, you know, to my granddaughter. You know, I didn't get to pick her, but your dad did a good job.
Would you have wanted to pick her?
No.
All
That's
right.
another thing I say. My current husband, Doug Iohato, I said if I had made a list of all the qualities I was looking for in a spouse, Dougie would not have made the long list. And I am so grateful that he's in my life. I always said that's God's great practical joke on me, was putting Dougie Iohato in my path.
To transition into that, how did you guys meet?
He was a sheet metal worker, and I worked in the benefit fund office, and we were just at some picnic, you know, an annual picnic that we had, and actually my friend Nora and I had been at Mancini's drinking, and we went over to the park, Highland Park Pavilion, where the guys were making booyah. And we walked in and told them we were city health inspectors.
And Grandpa was one of them?
And yeah, Grandpa
boy.
was one of them, and he and I started talking, and I remember walking away from that telling Nora, I have a crush on that guy. I don't know that I've ever felt like this about anybody before. So, and then it just kind of unfolded from there.
Serious question, what is booyah?
Oh, booyah. Booyah is a St. Paul thing. I don't know what the culture is, but you just throw all kinds of meat, chicken, pork, beef, everything into a big pot with
Okay.
vegetables, and you just cook it.
Okay.
And I don't eat it, but the sheet metal workers have a booyah every year to celebrate their members and to say thank you for all the hard workers. Grandpa was a union sheet metal worker and is a strong union man to this day.
Okay.
I can't believe you don't know what booyah is.
I thought it was some type of like alcohol, where you throw a bunch of alcohol together.
Booyah.
So, what are you up to nowadays?
Nowadays, well, I think the long story is, you know, Grandma Clary, you know, came up and lived close by us. We're in Taylor's Falls, and she was in Osceola, and I was able to spend pretty much every day with her in the last 18 months or so before she passed. So when she died, I was pretty lost. I had trouble finding my footing. You know, I just didn't have a direction. And last year, Grandpa Dougie and I bought a cabin, and that was really fulfilling a lifelong dream of mine, and I thought that would be enough, but not really. So in the course of the last year, your mom, Nikki, called me and talked about her challenges in working a 9-to-5 job, talking to people all day, and how stressful that was and anxiety provoking. And so we had a conversation about, you know, how do you make a living doing the things that you love to do, which is the cleaning, organizing, decluttering. And through the course of several of those conversations, she's helping me declutter, and we joined 136 Vintage, which is an antique shop, and have a space there where we're selling all the things that I've collected over the years and having a blast doing it, and also have created a market for her glass work, her artwork, and a business where she's cleaning and decluttering, and she's really good at it. And so that has given me some real direction that just gives me direction, gives me something to focus on, and developing a closer relationship with Nikki, which is, you know, the frosting on the cake. We love our business lunches at the Goat.
So what's next for you?
That's the question. What's next? Who knows?
We'll find out.
Yeah, to be continued.
Yeah.